Welcome to More Precious Than Rubies, where we explore the lives of women who embody the spirits of our biblical heroines in our modern world. On today's episode, I am joined by my good friend, Hailey Goulet, who is an ER nurse and a loving wife. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about how her life embodies the life of Phoebe, who's a woman in the Bible who is described as the first nurse and deaconess. Hailey, welcome to the show. I'm so thankful that you were willing to join me on today's episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited. I know. I'm so excited to talk about your job and kind of how you compare to a woman who's not really talked about in the Bible and learn a little bit more about her. So to start, can you share a personal story or memory to the people to kind of give them an idea of how we know each other?
We know each other because our now husbands, our then boyfriends, just really fell in love at a church winter camp and wanted to hang out. And they're like, our girlfriends would probably get along. And we do. And I think just through all of the double dates and then Disney trips on our own and things like that, we've just grown into great friends.
Yes, and that's a good call forward to, we're going to be talking about Disney today because that is something that definitely brought us together at the very beginning, and I'm super thankful for that. Okay, so before we get into kind of your job and talking a little bit about that, we're going to talk about Phoebe and her backstory a little bit so everyone can understand kind of the ties between Hailey and Phoebe. So she's not talked about too much like I had mentioned, but her story can be found in Romans 16, 1 through 2, and she was described as a deacon and a benefactor and was known for caring for anybody who visited her house, the sick, similar to how nurses provide care for their patients. She was commissioned by Paul as a deaconess serving the church, and she's said to have exemplified early Christian ideals of charity and selflessness. She gave care to sick strangers, orphans, and travelers under her roof, like I had mentioned. There's not too much on Phoebe in the Bible, so I had to do some research. And in doing so, I found some information according to a Bible study done by FaithWord, where Paul refers to her as a benefactor. And in the Greco-Roman world, benefactors or patrons funded various social enterprises, similar to Paul's journey through the Bible, as we saw. So that meant that she had means and that she was generous with her means and support of others, including Paul. So to transition, I want to read the scripture in which she was mentioned. Again, that's Romans 16, 1 through 2. This is the Apostle Paul speaking. I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deacon of the church in Cenchreae. I ask you to receive her in the Lord in a way worthy of his people and to give her any help she may need from you, for she has been the benefactor of many people, including me. Okay, so Hailey, before we talk about your connection to Phoebe and being a nurse, can you share a little bit of background on your vocation, how you became an ER nurse, and what led you to pursue this type of vocation?
Yeah, it's kind of been a lifelong journey. I didn't think I'd end up as a nurse. I decided when I was 5 that I wanted to be a pediatrician. I think I just really loved kids, I was 5, so I was also a child. But I had 2 younger sisters. So that might have played into it. And then I also really loved the human body aspect of science at 5, which I can't imagine was very deep. But when I was going to high school, looking into like med school versus other provider levels, I interviewed some doctors, I interviewed some PAs, I interviewed some nurse practitioners. I was like, actually, I don't want to go to med school for 1 bajillion years. So I thought I was going to do PA school. So I went to UCSD, got a degree in human biology. For PA school, you have to have about 2,000 hours on average, if not more, for immediate patient care hours. And I chose to do that as an EMT because I've always been interested in emergency medicine. Okay. I don't know why. But I've always just been like thrive in chaos, which doesn't make sense because I'm a very anxious and stressful person outside of work. But in an emergency situation, everything like calms down my body. So I did EMT for a while, and while I was doing that, I was able to talk to firefighters. I talked to some critical transport nurses. I talked to flight nurses, flight medics, nurses in the ED, started talking about PA versus NP, and nursing in general. And a lot of it was asking like, hey, I want to be in the room where it happens. If I'm a PA, am I going to be in the full trauma? Am I going to be in the STEMI? Am I going to be in the room doing CPR? And most of the answer was no. If you're going to be a PA in the ER, you're going to be picking up like lac repairs, positive COVIDs that just need Tamiflu and go, that kind of thing. But the nurses are always in there because you always need nurses in the room.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I'll go NP one day, but for now I'll do nursing. Mm-hmm. But I mean, another play into that was at this time, Nate and I got married. Yeah. We moved away, became financially independent, but is way cheaper than NP school is an associate's degree in nursing. So I think finances played a part there also. Okay. And now that I'm in the job as an RN, I don't currently, nor do I see myself in the near future having a desire to go NP. Okay. I really like being at the bedside. Nate's still convinced maybe that someday I'll go that way. But for right now, RN it is.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for all that information. That's super helpful. Okay, so now we know a little bit about Hailey. We know about her background as a nurse. So let's go into the connections between you and Phoebe. So she was commended by Paul for her leadership and service. So how do you see your work as a nurse reflecting those same qualities of leadership and service in your life?
There's two sides to this coin. I've always been, I feel like, servant leader led. I've held a lot of leadership roles throughout my life in various aspects. Mm-hmm. And serving is the way I've always led. And I served in our church. Yeah. Things like that. I just have always been wanting to be there for the people. I'm a big sister. I'm there for my little sisters. I'm there for my parents. That's just what I like to do. I just like to be there for people. So in that aspect, nursing is incredibly service type where I'm there for the community. I think where a funny line gets in with nursing is the community assumes like you're here to serve me so I can do whatever I want. And I think that's a real, and it'll probably come up later, distinct variation to like, just know like, yeah, I do want to serve you, but you are not the boss of me kind of deal. Yeah. But for most patients who are kind and not abusive, I do love just like being there. Like, I see you're in pain. I'm going to help you take care of that. I see you're having an emergency. I'm going to be here for you. I'm going to get your partner water. Like, we're just going to make this terrible situation as least terrible as possible. Sure. And in that aspect, we're also leaders. Like, we're leaders of our rooms. Like, if I have a trauma room, if I have a critical care room, like, it's my responsibility to lead all the other nurses in that room, making sure we're taking care of this patient efficiently and well, communicating with the doctors, all that kind of stuff. So it is a lot of leadership and a lot of service. And I enjoy both aspects of it.
I see, even just in our friendship and your marriage, like how much you are really good at service and how that is, it's probably challenging, not only that you're having to serve people at work, but you're coming home and serving in your home. But I still see that you're really good at that. So good for you. I commend you on that. Thanks. Okay, so Phoebe's story, though brief in the Bible, speaks volumes about the importance of supporting others, like you said, your patients, others around you, your husband, your community. In what ways have you found God's strength and encouragement in your role as a nurse, particularly when caring for others who are in a vulnerable situation?
It's a good question. I think it's just because of, God's strength in Jesus' story. I think one of the most powerful forms of ministry is just being Jesus with skin on, just being like, there's something different. Like, she's never, this way, or like vulgar, or although I have picked up cussing, I've got to work on that one. But it's just like, the way you love on the less fortunate, the way Jesus came down to earth and loved on the vulnerable and the less fortunate. That's just my whole job, is people of the community who are in a vulnerable position, regardless of financial or, housing stability. But we see all aspects of that. And I do have to often, especially on really stressful days, because it is an ER and I'm doing, 100 things, remind myself before I go into a patient room that this person doesn't know that I'm doing 100 other things. They may know, but they are not carrying the mental load of that. I am. But I need to treat this person with the kindness, patience, and love as if, they're only aware of their terrible situation. Yeah. And communicate with them in that way. And I think when I'm exhausted and out of patience, only God's strength really gets me through some of those shifts. That and some really good coworkers. You can just like vent about it and then just step in that room and do it all over again. Yeah. But I don't know if I'm successful to just love on the people that I have to take care of, as Jesus would if he was down here taking care of them.
Phoebe was a benefactor, so that meant she used her resources to help others. And you give so much of yourself daily. You give your energy, your time. How do you stay spiritually replenished in order to come home and do it all again tomorrow?
Some days and weeks are easier than others. It's a lot of support from my friends, whether they're at work, Christian or not. Nate and I attend a weekly small group. They have been with me since we moved up here and we started this small group the day that I started nursing school.
Wow.
So they have seen me through the school and through the first 2 years in the ED. And they have just been insane in the way they've prayed for me and supported me, though they may not understand practically what I have to go through emotionally. They're just always there for me. I literally called my friend one day and I was like, Nate's not home. I had a terrible day. I'm just going to come lay on your couch and cry. And she was like, okay.
Wow.
So, just community is huge. Nate is huge. When I started this job, it's really easy to take home all of the trauma and the sadness. And you can't do that. You won't survive this field of work if you bring that home every day. Because what I'm seeing every day is most people's worst day.
Yeah.
And I can't bring that home. So Nate, who works at the airport, really quickly came up with, you got to leave the airplanes at the airport. And so when I come home, sometimes I'll vent about a case or two, or a patient or two. But for the most part, I just really got to give it to God and leave the airplanes at the airport. And then, really compartmentalize work and home life.
Wow.
Yeah. And some days it's easier than others. Some days I lay tossing and turning, thinking about one case. And then other days I'm like, it's gone. It's at work. That place runs 24/7. Somebody's taking care of it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to think about it. Because my husband, Adam, was an EMT, as you know. And a lot of times I think it was hard for him to kind of switch off that part of his brain when he came home, because I don't understand. I can listen and I can be there for him just like Nate can be for you, but we're not the ones seeing that stuff. Yeah. And so it's good to have those friends in your community that do experience the same thing, so that if you did need to talk to them and you're using your small group and Nate as a sense of comfort and refreshment as you go back.
Without trying to trauma dump on them.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fine line.
Fine line. Okay, Hailey, before we wrap up, that was super helpful and really interesting to learn about how you see God's strength as a way to replenish yourself, and similar to how Phoebe worked as a benefactor to help support Paul, you're helping to support your community in the hospital and everything like that. But I want to learn a little bit more about you personally. So like I teased earlier, Hailey and I have Disney in common, and we're what some people might call Disney adults. Proudly, I would call myself a proud Disney adult for those who would make fun of me.
I think I'm a shy one. I think I really am one.
You have a secret Disney Instagram page.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know the password to that anymore.
You don't post on it too much, but she did have one.
I did have one. That is true.
I mean, I followed that thing. And you told me you would watch Disney vlogs if I did them.
I would absolutely watch
So I think we've kind of just agreed that we do love Disney a lot. So kind of on that same vein, what is a Disney character that you feel has impacted your life? Now, we talked a little bit about this before the episode started. So we talked about how there are categories to this. There are Disney characters that are inspiring, one that we want to be like, and maybe one that's our favorite. So what's one that's impacted you or inspired you?
I really love Tiana's just work ethic. I just feel like I work really hard at work, but I think sometimes I work so hard at work, I come home and then I have no more work ethic. And she just grinds day at home and at night and at work, and she's just getting it. And she does have to learn balance. Right. So I think I need a little bit more work ethic at home, though, maybe. Sometimes I think I balance the rest a little too much. So I do love her work ethic. I also love the story of Moana, where she just really has to go through and find herself amidst the chaos. Yeah. And I feel like not necessarily this year, but especially when Nate and I moved, or getting engaged, and just so much life change is about when that movie came out. And I was just I don't know who I am. And there's a whole song in there about how she finds who she is. I'm like,
right.
oh, got me. There were tears shed. And I just also love that story of just like, you got to go out, you got to adventure, you got to do your thing, you got to feel what's right. And then hopefully you find yourself.
Yeah.
So.
And she's really excited about the second one. We talked a little bit. Well, it's like more of excitement, nervousness that we do it justice. It. Yeah, it's true.
I love that story.
It's true. I have high hopes, but we'll see in the next months how it goes.
Hopefully.
Okay. Tiana and Moana are her inner princesses. Yeah. And we love that.
And I do just love the Little Mermaid. I think that's mostly because of the ocean and being a mermaid.
That's true. Hailey does love the beach. Yeah, you live in a place where there's more of a river-esque water place, but you still get your water time in.
I do. There's some water.
Glad for that. Okay, so this one, moving on, has there been a specific Bible verse or maybe like a worship song that's been getting you through your time as either since you've moved here or in the past months?
I don't know the reference. I want to say it's like Psalm 18, like 1 and 2. And it says like, I love you, Lord. My strength, you are like a rock and my cornerstone. And that might not be Psalm 18 at all. But there is a verse, I think, in Psalms where he's just like, you are my rock and my cornerstone. Because, I mean, if I was out here doing this willy-nilly, I think it would just break me. I think I have a lot of work friends that we talked about that are not Christian. And I don't know how sometimes they get through it. I just don't. Because I don't think I could do it without him.
Wow. So you and I both grew up at EFCC and we went to the same church. We met, you met a lot of your closest friends, both at classical high school, which is where you went, that they ended up kind of just going to EFCC. Like a lot of your friends also went to EFCC. But since you've moved here, you've changed churches. So, and you're very close to these friends because we were all in the same friend group. So, how has that affected you? Was it difficult to kind of join a new group? How would you speak to someone who maybe is going through that transition?
It was terrifying. I didn't want to do it. I've had the same friends since like the 5th or 6th grade, and then turned 25 and moved to a completely different state with just Nate, who I loved and wanted to do that with. He had lived here before we got married, so he had done some church shopping, and then I attended the church that we go to now with him, and he was like, "This is kind of feels like a good one."
Yeah.
You know, like they preach the Bible as the Bible is, and they don't interpret it for something else.
Yeah.
So we went there. It was September of 2019 that we got married. We signed up for small groups the end of fall because they had just started the fall session, but then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And we did not get to go to a small group till this following September when I started nursing school.
Wow.
So it was just Nate and I in our little apartment for a while, which was a tough transition, not because he wasn't enough for me, it's just because I didn't have any sense of community anymore. And even though we could fly down to San Diego and see family and friends, COVID was happening. So we really couldn't fly down to San Diego to see family and friends. And then when we finally got assigned to a small group, I was like, I'm not going. I hate meeting new people. I'm very secretly shy. I'm super loud at work and I like out and about, but inside I am so shy and I don't like putting myself out there. I remember pulling up to our first small group meeting and just like crying in the car really quick because I was just so nervous.
Yeah.
I know those people are some of my best friends. Yeah. And we actually lived before we moved to this house.
New house alert.
New house alert. We lived in our small group leader's granny flat for 3 years. And it was the best. Cried about that yesterday.
We did.
It.
And that just shows how precious it was. That just shows how precious that time was and how the community has been so precious to you that now it's like you're going to have a hard time moving on from here to the next place if and when someday.
Can't get there yet.
I know we won't talk about that maybe, but I think it's really cool to see how it's encouraging to see that even if you are really shy and you've built a really good community back home, you can do it. You can move on and find a new group of people who are going to be there for you.
Just be brave even while you're scared.
So even in your experience of meeting this new community, like you said, you were at home with Nate in this time of COVID. How have you seen your faith play a role in your marriage and in your career? Are there ways that you've seen God work in both areas or maybe individually?
Definitely in both areas. Because Nate and I have relied on each other so much, especially during COVID times where it was just us. I mean, we're people, we're broken, and we'll never be all that the other person needs. So you definitely just need God as the person that we are individually relying on, bringing us together.
Mm-hmm.
The marital triangle.
Right.
I think same at work, especially since I'm one of the only Christians I know on night shift. I don't know if I do a great job representing God, but it's something that pulls on my heart, especially when they tend to like bash religion or like really scream about things that I feel differently about. I'll be like, well, I'm a Christian and I'm not in here, hating on everybody. I think that's a big thing, especially in the Pacific Northwest. We have a lot of like homosexual, transgender patients, and I just love on them the way that I love on any other patient. Yeah. And I think that's weird for a lot of my coworkers.
Okay.
Like they'll be like, oh, I didn't know you were Christian because you were kind to these people. And I'm like, I'm not going to not love people.
Right.
Like God called us to love our neighbor, period. Right. So I do try to bring up that I am a Christian, even though I think I might be the only one I know on my shift. And I just have to kind of pray about when to speak and when to not in those situations, as far as like, because a lot of them I think have experienced Christianity in such a poor and judgmental light. Yeah. I don't want to be the person like screaming you're going to go to hell.
No one wants to hear that.
I also don't want to be silent. So praying about that a lot, just guiding me when to speak and when to not has been pretty big at work also. Okay.
Even you mentioning that there's not really a Christian community at work, which can sometimes be super helpful just as a starting base point of like going to work every day and being like, I know my job is hard, but at least I have this community that we're on the same level. So even just as that, you don't have that and you have a very demanding job. How do you balance having a demanding work life and your responsibilities at home? What would you say to other women who are juggling a difficult job and even just a role as a wife at home as your responsibilities?
I don't know that I do a great job of it. Like we mentioned before with Tiana, she's just such a hard worker all the time. I get home and I'm exhausted. Like, and maybe I'm not the greatest wife to Nate. Nate is so gentle and forgiving and loving and just, I think, knows I'm so exhausted that I don't know what my traditional like answer is. Like, yeah, I fulfilled my wifely duties today. Like I come home and I try to be kind to Nate. We work nights, so like we'll come home, we'll have breakfast together, we'll decompress a little bit, and then go to bed, wake up, help each other pack lunch, and then go. And I mean, the days that we work, we are not spending time together. It's breakfast when we get home, bed, wake up. I leave like 2 hours before him. Yeah. Make coffee, give him a hug and a kiss, and go. So I don't, on our days off, I'm also exhausted. Fair. So it kind of depends on the night before, on the shift before. And I think he's been very helpful and be like, we should go outside today and we should get up today. And I think I don't have enough self-drive sometimes. So have a really great husband. I don't know if that's advice, but I think it's something I am actively praying about currently. This question is just kind of like, how can I balance this more at home so I'm not giving all of my energy to work? Yeah. And not able to give any energy at home. Right. Because if family is watching this, not that we're planning on having any children soon, but if we were to have children, I cannot imagine doing that. Yeah. I just can't. I come home and I barely take care of myself. So we're working on it. I don't have really good advice. If you have advice, let me know.
Put it in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of More Precious Than Rubies with my friend Hailey. If you'd like to hear an extended audio version of this episode, head on over to Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To get early access to future episodes, or to get early access to these extended audio versions, sign up for my newsletter. You can find the link in the description of this episode.